Hey y'all, welcome back to Legally Live. I'm McKinley. Today we're going to be going over day 2 and probably day 3 of the Kaitlin Armstrong trial, which is going on in Travis County currently. I have been present for a lot of the testimony in the courtroom. I have missed some though, so my notes get a little spotty because sometimes I had to go to other courtrooms to handle cases. And so just bear with me. I think I have most of what we're looking for. I might be missing a couple of witnesses, but I don't think it was anybody super important. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to try to get these updates going like as soon as court is out or as close to court being over as possible so that I can be caught up. The first witness that we're going to go over today. Okay, so when we started court on day 2, Detective Ramirez was still on the stand, and at this point, it was, sorry, my eye is like killing me. It was cross, and defense just started asking questions about the retrieval of the video, and just like nitpicking on tiny little things that might not have been noted in the report. I think they wanted to know whether or not Detective Ramirez had noted in his report that he emailed whether or not that this was like the retrieval of the video was sent via email. And they also wanted to know if he verified the timestamp. And he said he couldn't verify the timestamp without messing with the metadata. And so, no, he did not verify the timestamp. So it was not cooperated. And then the state also like wanted to go back to talking about the description of the vehicle. And they're like, so you said that the reason that this vehicle caught your attention was because of the way that it was driving, right? Like it was driving very slowly. Well, this is a neighborhood. So isn't that how you want drivers to be driving through a neighborhood or a residential area? You want them to be driving slowly. So really that shouldn't be suspicious at all. And Ramirez was like, not really, because this is downtown Austin and people drive crazy in downtown Austin. So it is suspicious. And that was kind of funny. And then they're like, well, did you note the speed in your report? He said no. And then they were like, what about the wheels and the taillight observations? Those aren't in your report, are they? He said no. You couldn't tell who was driving, could you? No. I mean, they're grasping here, really, truly. And then they said, oh, and didn't you also say that it was suspicious or got your attention because it had a bike rack on it? Well, this is Austin, Texas. Aren't there many more thousands of vehicles that also have bike racks on them, or black SUVs with bike racks on them? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure there are. And then they're like, in fact, there was one in the driveway that night, wasn't there? And he's like, I don't know. I mean, I know there was a vehicle in the driveway. I don't know if it was a black SUV or if it had a bike rack on it. I think it might have been. So that was a good point. I've lost my jewel. Also, my camera's super blurry because the lighting is terrible in here. But I think I'm going to have to stop this recording to go get the jewel. I know it's terrible of me, but I'm doing it. Hold on. Okay, and we're back. Hopefully the sound is fixed, being that the camera's blurry. We're super late. Hopefully the mic's at least working better. Okay, let's see here. What happened to my notes? Oh, and then the state just asks him about confirmation bias and whether or not he's heard that term before. And he says something about like, yeah, it's like this new term that we're using that has come up in like the last year and a half. I've noticed that I've been asked about it a lot at trials in the last year and a half. And it just means like, don't get tunnel vision, blah, blah, blah. And then they ask him about when his shift normally ends, and he says his shift normally ends at 4 a.m., but he didn't leave this day until like 9 o'clock. And they said, like, you didn't have a person of interest by the time you went home, did you? And he's like, no, I think we did. We had a person of interest. It was Colin Strickland. And they said, okay, but you didn't have any specific motive at this time, right? You'd only done, and he's like, nope, you only did one interview. Yes. Ugh. And super expensive bike was removed from the apartment. And he's like, I don't know the price of the bike, but it was my understanding that the bike was located. And it was definitely located at this point. And they're like, okay, no forensics had been done. And he's like, right. And then they said, okay, and you said that yesterday that it was your belief that this was like a personal crime. That the victim knew or at least the perpetrator knew the victim. And he said, yeah, it was just my belief. It wasn't necessarily anybody else's or like the lead investigators, And he said it was, and they were like, oh, so is that based solely on lack of forced entry? And he's like, no, I mean, not just that, but also the clean apartment. The phones were still plugged into the wall. There were laptops where the body was found and the types of injuries to the body. Yeah, it just like didn't look like there was any kind of a struggle in there. And the type of wounds to the body made it seem like it was more of like an angry or more personal crime. And then the defense said, okay, well, anyone can walk through an unlocked door. Isn't that correct? It doesn't have to be someone that knows the victim. If the door is unlocked, then no forced entry. If the door is unlocked, then no forced entry. Oh, then no forced entry would be required to get in. Isn't that correct? And he's like, yeah, which was a really good point. I'm just too tired to read my notes and understand what I'm talking about at this point. So then I think I had to go upstairs and like I had to go to another court, clients, silly stuff. And at this point, I believe that another crime scene or a crime scene analyst, crime scene specialist named Longoria was the last name. I don't know the first name. This person took hundreds of photos, and some were very graphic, I guess, including Mo's body with the wounds, after she had been killed. The state and the defense were going back and forth with each other about the splatter outside. So this is just the defense trying to undermine the investigation and draw attention to like the things that weren't done correctly or that could have possibly led to things being done incorrectly. And so they're going back and forth with the state about splatter outside the scene. But come to find out, it was tested and it was negative. But they were just trying to undermine Ramirez in the investigation because Ramirez said it was paint, just like on site. As soon as he showed it, he's just like, oh, that's paint, without ever even testing it. But truth of the matter was, it was tested and it was negative. So I think that point was moot. Then the next person that testified would be Katie Ferreira. She's an APD crime scene specialist. She goes over the print cards. So she was in charge of collecting evidence at the scene and collecting some of it to take back to the lab to do the collections. And so she swabs the bike for DNA at the scene, and something else she swabbed for DNA. I don't remember. And one of the big things that came out, and she also did fingerprints and stuff like that. One of the big things that came out during her testimony was the bike. So that was like the big piece of evidence that was recovered from the scene. And when they presented it to the jury, it was still like in the they had custom created this like large plastic like Ziploc basically that held the bicycle in it. And the prosecutor got her to cut it open and lift the bike out and, set it beside the bench and also get out the other things that were packaged together with it or that were bagged in there with it. And that was like the accessories, they called them. I think it was the helmet, like a tire tool, some energy chews, a water bottle, an accessories pack, I think. And I think they said sunglasses maybe. And the helmet. Did I say helmet? And that when Ferreira first laid eyes on the bike, that helmet was attached to the handlebars of the bicycle, like as it was laying down in the field of bamboo or the little thicket of bamboo. Yeah, so the bicycle, they couldn't fit it in their vehicle. It had to go into the back of it had to go into the back of an officer's patrol vehicle. And then it was she followed that patrol vehicle down to, I think they said East Substation, where it was turned in, I think. And it was secured eventually in the bike room, or no, the bike was secured in the drawing room because they don't have a locker big enough for the bike. All smooth areas, rims, and accessories were printed. They bagged her bike, her helmet, and all the accessories together. They swabbed the bike for DNA on scene because they didn't want to lose that in the transport. So they swabbed the handlebars and the seat on the scene. And then she also points out that in August of 22, she did a second set of swabs. And this time she swabbed under part of the bike seat for DNA. And all were submitted into evidence. And some of the collecting was done at APD main station. For instance, there she collected gunshot residue from Cash's hands. And she did a buccal swab of Cash and swabbed the blood residue that was visible on her hands. The gunshot residue was collected from, or the GSR testing collecting was collected from cash as per their SOPs within 4 hours of the incident. But they point out that GSR isn't, it can like very easily be transferred to other people. So if Cash had it on her, she came in direct contact with the shooting victim's actual, like her chest, and she was shot in the chest. So it would make sense. So they don't have to come in direct contact with the firearm. Then Cash's photos were taken, and they were taken in the way that they're always taken. And then they like specifically took pictures of the blood, the dried blood that was on her. And then cross affera was done by Kofer. He pointed out Price was the number 2 on scene. Is number 2 ultimately responsible for the scene? She doesn't know. He asked her to take the bike, like actually physically take it into the well right in front of the jurors. And so she had to like lift it up and take it right in front of the jurors. And he got up from his seat and he joined her. And so it was super hard to hear. I really don't know what he was saying, but it sounded like he was discussing the different like ways that she picked up the bike when she was manipulating it. And I think he pointed out that one of the areas that she touched in order to manipulate the bicycle, like to get it to that area, was like the long bar. I don't remember what they called it, but it was another smooth area that she did not swab, but she could have. And she literally just touched it herself in order to get the bike into the place where he wanted her to get it. And so she could have, and it might have come back with something on it, but she never swabbed it. And so they don't know. But he was just pointing out, like, you could have done this, but you didn't. Like maybe it would have shown an alternate suspect, but you didn't do it. And so now here we are. And then he was also asking her about the areas underneath the seat and if she saw some little like notches there, and about the instruments and the pouch under the seat. I don't know why he was asking her that, but he did. When he says, when you first laid eyes on the bike and walked down the alleyway to where it was found, was it a dark area? She said yes. And he said, was there foliage? And she said, yeah, there was foliage like at the side of a fence or something. And he said, did you notice any bike tracks? She said no. And he said, in the bamboo thicket, did you see any bike tracks? She said no. He said, you don't know how the bike got there. Any evidence consistent with someone having been riding the bike to where it was found? She said no. And then he pulled up a picture of the bike as it was found when she arrived. He asked her to put the bike and the helmet in the same position it was in when it was found. She said she didn't remember. He showed her the photo, and then she tried to do it by copying the photo. He eventually asked her, did you coordinate with Salinas about him transporting the bike? And she said, no, I just said I would follow him because it was in his patrol car. And Kofer says, were precautions taken to preserve evidence? And I think she says, I don't recall. And then they confirm that she was solely responsible for the latent prints. And she says, yes. Did you process all services that were important? She says, yes. In terms of DNA, would you have done anything differently? She says, no. He says, was the gum wrapper processed? And she says, yes, the gum wrapper was processed. And he says, what about the chocolate bar and wrapper? And she said she didn't know there was a chocolate bar and a wrapper found. And so she didn't process it. And then he goes into the printed lift cards weren't labeled correctly, but she says like nothing, it didn't like cause any harm. And then later on, it comes out that the DNA on the bike was highly likely to have come from Armstrong. Okay, let's see here. Who are we on now? I know I'm missing people. That's day 3. Hold on. Okay. My notes are all messed up because my laptop died and I had to do it in a few different notebooks. So anyway, I don't know. I really don't know if it's in the right order, but we're just going to try to knock these out. So the next witness that I have is Martha Palau. I don't think I'm saying that right. She's a neighbor. She had 4 Ring doorbells at 6:30 a.m. on May 12th. APD knocked and asked to see the footage. And as they were scrolling through the footage, they pointed out to her the black SUV. She lives about 100 meters from where Wilson died. At 8:26 p.m. on her surveillance camera, there's a black SUV drives by slowly. And then another angle of the Jeep from the back of Plow's home facing the apartment where Mo died at 8:37 p.m. The Jeep creeps by at that time. She says that she did not hear gunshots, and 2 days later, APD came back and wanted to see the footage again. Cross for this witness, defense just asked, like, you've never seen Armstrong before today? And she says no. And then there's also a question about whether or not whether or not her cameras could capture somebody walking up the stairs to Cash's place. And she says no. The next witness is Michael Donlin. He lived 2 houses down from Cash. He has a doorbell camera that continuously records audio and video. He saw a post on Nextdoor that police wanted video of a certain time frame, so he sent the video he had for that time frame. Next, we see the video at 9:15 p.m., and they ask him what it depicts to him, and he says he hears screams and gunshots, and he also says that prior to that, he also heard some talking, but he couldn't make out what it was. So when you actually hear the audio, it sounds like a short scream followed by a little bit longer scream, and then a pop, pop, pause, and then a final pop. And then there's some doorbell video sometime before 8:30. A black SUV is seen driving super slowly on one of his cameras. The next witness is Andrew Vong. He says that on May 11th, APD asked him if his camera would have captured footage near Cash's apartment. He said yes. They followed up a few days later and got it. I have no idea what it shows. I don't remember. The next witness is Detective Timothy Price from APD. He was on the case and worked the scene. He knocked on the door of the landlord and got permission to look through his backyard, which butts up to Cash's apartment. Medical examiner told Price that Mo's body had 3 gunshot wounds, 2 to the face and head, and 1 to the chest. Price didn't know who the bike belonged to, but determined that it was Mo's through the course of the investigation. Cross of Price, the confirmation bias question comes up again. And defense asks Price if Harris seemed concerned when they knocked on his door, and he said no. And then they said, "Are gunshots loud?" I don't know what his answer was. And then they said, "Why didn't you search his home?" And he said, like, it didn't seem necessary. It was irrelevant or something like that. And on redirect, said, "Did Harris give you any probable cause to enter his home to search it?" And he said no. And then David Harris, the landlord, Cash's landlord, takes a stand. And he right away lets it be known that he first told police that he didn't hear anything because he qualifies that by saying he was disoriented and police knocking had woken him up from his sleep. But he followed up by reaching out a few days later, and he told law enforcement that he heard someone rush out of Cash's apartment down the stairs. I think he heard a door slamming and a bicycle traveling south. And then the state asks, "Did you kill Moriah Wilson?" And he says no. Cross of Harris, he says he heard a bike whisking away while he was in his garage. And he also admits that he was in his garage taking a bong rip. And I think that's all I have for day 2. So then day 3, I think, starts off with Daniel Shear, who was a neighbor. He says that a detective put a card on his door several days later asking for surveillance footage, and he had a Google Nest camera, and he felt a responsibility to respond. He sent APT the time frame they requested. This seems like the same exact thing that I just heard. I don't know what's happening here. Oh, okay. Yeah, so he sent APD the time frame that they had requested. They wanted any movement during the time frame. It shows him leaving his house around 8:30 because he was going like to the movie or to have dinner with friends or something like that. The movie. And he says he saw police lights when he was returning, but when he's walking out at 8:30, then like 6 minutes later or something, you see a motorcycle driving past, which I guess is Colin and Mo. Oh, my eye. I've been staring at a computer screen for too long. Okay. So then Cross of Shear is Kofor, and he says, before today, had you ever heard, or like before this incident, had you ever heard of Colin Strickland or Kaitlin Armstrong, or had you seen them before? And he says no. Next is Sergeant Jason Ayers. He started with APD homicide in 2021. And he says that another detective identified Colin Strickland for questioning because he was the last person to see Mo. He was a cyclist and they had a past romantic history. He had also been told that a black Jeep with a bike rack was seen at murder scene. And Ayers said that when he and Spittler went to Strickland's house to question him, they actually saw a black Jeep with a bike rack in the driveway. He said that Spittler told Strickland that Wilson had passed away, and I think that there was a homicide investigation. Then the state played the body cam of this interaction with Colin. They played it outside the presence of the jury, and the defense starts objecting. They think it's like a bunch of unnecessary stuff because I think it's a 17-minute video. The judge ends up saying that there's like a lot of questioning that happens in there actually after like the initial reaction. So the judge says that the whole video can be played, but only the audio from like the first 3 minutes or the first initial interaction to capture his like initial response to hearing the news. And then after that, it's just played without the sound. And on the video, the police actually ask him, like, he seems confused at first. The police are asking him if he knows an Anna like, I think they're trying to say Anna Moriah Wilson. Anyway, it takes him a while to actually get Mo and Wilson out together. And so he looks very confused. And then finally you can see like the recognition starting to come to him and like kind of the shock setting in as he can, well, I'm sure he knows it's not good news. And then they say that she's passed away and he's shocked and upset. He looks down, he covers his mouth. He gets like, it seems like he's getting emotional. Ayers tells the jury that they showed up unannounced, and while they questioned Colin in the garage, that he saw a female pass by the window 2 or 3 times. So clearly Armstrong. Ayers says that that his initial thoughts on Colin Strickland were that he was suspicious of him and he would have to be ruled out as a suspect. Ayers says later that same afternoon, Ayers serves a residential search warrant on Colin and Kaitlin's home. Ayers says he saw Armstrong when they served the warrant and says Armstrong was there with her attorney. Evidence collected from inside the house and the Jeep were laptops, cell phones, DNA swabs of Jeep, photos, 9mm handguns, ammo, pics, box that contains handguns that was in the closet, several boxes of 9mm ammo, clips, holsters, and manual found in cardboard box above the black box. Cross of Ayers. Did you touch the case? Did you touch this case at all other than on May 12th when you were questioning Strickland and the search warrant? And he says no. He agrees that he was a supplemental detective on the case. Ayers says that the lead detective Spittler was newest detective in the unit. Defense asked if he knocked on the door to talk to Armstrong when Ayers saw a woman in the window, and he says no. Then they ask if APD wants to search a vehicle or residence, they can secure it and make sure no one touches it. And Ayers says there's circumstances where that can be done, yes. And then APD says, but before APD served a search warrant, someone from APD asked her to get out of her house and to stay out of her house. Then they put up the picture of where the gun box was located, which was inside that closet. And they ask if it looks like primarily traditionally male clothing that's stored in that closet. And he agrees that yes. Then they go through the ammo boxes. Most are for target practice. One is for self-defense. Then they show Ayers a picture of an iPad that wasn't seized, even though the warrant gave them authority to seize electronic communication devices. Then they go back to the interaction with Colin, and they ask if there was time for Colin to have gone back in the house and to tell someone what happened before coming out. And Ayers says, I assume a normal person putting on socks and shoes would have enough time to at least briefly tell another person what's going on. On redirect, Ayers is asked, can ammo meant for target practice still kill someone? And he says, absolutely. And then the next witness is Marisa Guevara, formerly of the APD crime scene unit, responded to Colin Strickland and Kaitlin Armstrong's home to assist with executing a search warrant. Officers were already there when she arrived. She was tasked with gathering evidence related to DNA and firearms and also photos. Aware that the warrant was for a murder investigation, but did not know any of the details. Then we review a lot of the photos that were taken as part of the evidence gathering. We see the black Jeep in the driveway. She says she was instructed to take the photograph of the Jeep. We see the bike rack that had 5 small reflectors and 1 was missing. She had to go inside the house to grab the keys to the Jeep, and while she was waiting to get the keys to the Jeep, she also took a photo of some laptops and cell phones inside and a yoga mat on the kitchen table. She also discovered a license plate, a valid passport of Kaitlin Armstrong, cash, cards, foreign currency, Kaitlin Armstrong's sister's passport card, Christine Elizabeth Armstrong, and COVID vax cards. And the interesting thing here is, the way it was reported, I always thought she went to New York to get the passport, but maybe not. It seems like it might have actually been in her place. And so that seems more planned out, That seems more planned out. Okay, so for DNA, she swapped the Jeep and the residence for DNA. The next day, May 13th, she was told to process the collected items for DNA and fingerprints. So she did that with the firearms. There were no prints on the firearms, but there was an oily-like substance. On cross, they asked Guevara who was the lead in charge of the investigation, and she says, Ayers, and acknowledges collaboration with Ayers during evidence gathering process. Importance of integrity of the scene. So this is all like the normal cross questions we've been getting all along. And then they say, when you searched the Jeep, there was no apparent blood, was there? And she says, correct. I did not note any reddish colored stains in the vehicle. And then they say, you also didn't note the type of foreign currency found. And she says, yeah, I did. She also says that she was advised by a cooperative female on the scene, the location of the keys. And I think she even handed them to her or something. The next witness was the Pullburger GM. Pullburger is the restaurant located just like a few feet from the parking lot of Deep Eddy. So this was where they went to go eat after swimming at Deep Eddy. And it's just like a teeny tiny little place where you can just like walk and get food and beers or drinks or whatever. And I actually had to go upstairs for this witness, so I have no idea what they said. But I do think a surveillance video was played. I think that was the only thing that the GM was there for. Wow. Okay. And so then next is Colin Strickland. They immediately get into just the timeline of the relationship. They met in fall of 2019. He describes the 2.5-year on-off relationship as tumultuous at times, but then also says at times it was very comfortable and loving, but still wasn't sure if it would work long term. However, she ended up moving in after her place flooded from the big freeze in February of 2021. And it was supposed to be temporary, but she was still living there. He says he did not date other women when there was a break in the relationship, but that he simply entertained the thought of dating other women. He maintains that he and Wilson were just friends. In October of 2021, Strickland and Armstrong were at a race in Arkansas, and Mo was there. And after, some of the racers were invited to go on a ride together, and Armstrong was not invited because she didn't have the skill level for the difficult ride. Armstrong got super mad that she wasn't invited and was, I think, jealous or something. They fought on the car ride home and ended up breaking up. At that time, Wilson ended up in Austin for a bit, and they had a romantic relationship. But even during this time that Armstrong and Colin were broken up, they continued to live together in the same house. And yeah, I think they were only broken up for a short little bit. So then we start the timeline of May 11th, like what happened that day. He says he went on a ride with Kaitlin Armstrong and another male racer. Kaitlin quit after 30 minutes, but they kept going for another 2.5 hours. He had a dentist appointment up north at 3 p.m. that he had to race to. All this, like the whole day, he had been texting with Mo about their plans to meet up. They already had plans to go to Deep Eddy because it was super hot outside, and he just wanted to take her around and show her somewhere cool in the city. He also knew that Mo had gone on her own bike ride in the city because she had texted him a picture. She also sent the address to Cash's place. He says he had been there before. He parked in the alleyway and went upstairs and sat on the couch until Mo had all her things together. Then they went to his motorcycle, and she got on the back and wore his extra helmet. Throughout the entire evening, Kaitlin was texting and calling, but he ignored all communication from her. After Deep Eddy, Mo changed into some dry clothes, and they walked to Pull Burger and ordered food and drinks. The first ticket has a timestamp of 7 p.m. and it's paid for by Colin. And it has food. I don't remember what the food was, but I think it had 3 drinks on it. I don't remember what they were, but 3 alcohol drinks. And then at 7:56, there's another ticket, and it had another alcohol drink, like a Hurricane or something like that. And this one was paid for by Mo. This is at 7:56 p.m. and they close at 8 o'clock. So last call. When they were completely done, they left, and he went to drop her off. She got her things, gave him his helmet, and he said, "See you tomorrow for the pre-race dinner." Then the state asks, did Kaitlin know that Mo was in town? And he says no. Did Kaitlin know where Mo stays when she's in Austin? No. Were Kaitlin and Mo friends? No. He then says he stops on his way home to text Kaitlin his alibi about delivering flowers, which he clarifies means weed, to a friend that was in pain. When he got home, he had not received a response. He remembers having a 7-minute call with a friend about bike parts. He then texted Armstrong about plans for the next morning. Still no response. Eventually, Armstrong arrives home. Colin keeps working on his bike. Eventually, he goes inside to pack provisions for the race and for travel. He drinks whiskey and watches a cycling documentary at the kitchen table with Kaitlin. They both sleep at the house together. Everything seems normal. Everything seems fine. Then he goes into May the 12th. He's sitting in his garage working on his bicycle when 2 men approach him And I actually don't have any of my notes on this. So I'm just going to be going from memory here. And he eventually learned, and he says that he didn't understand what they were saying because they were saying like, Animo. Like, do you know Animo? Do you know Animo? And eventually he hears Mo and he's like, yes. And yeah, he just like confirms that he was completely shell shocked and just really in shock. He immediately agrees to go down to the station with them and give a voluntary statement. And he confirms that when he goes inside, he does tell Mo that, not Mo, he tells Armstrong that Mo has been killed and he has to go down and answer questions with the detectives because he was the last one to be with her the night before. And he said she seemed shocked, but he doesn't remember if she said anything or what. And he goes down to the station where he proceeds to have, he says his phone was taken away from him and he was put into a room for questioning. And the questioning lasted 6.5 hours. And he said it was very unpleasant. He knew while he was at the station getting questioned that there was going to be a search warrant was going to be executed at his residence that he shared with Kaitlin, and he didn't have a phone, so he couldn't communicate with her about it. He decided it would be best to just go to his dad's house, so he went to his dad's after he left APD for a while where he had access to a phone, and eventually he left and went back home. And I think he said when he got there that Kaitlin was there. I think that's what he said. And that they were both shocked and they talked about like what had happened a little bit, but they didn't really go into depth about anything. And he did tell her, though, that she needed to probably come up with like a timeline to show where she had been that evening because she was going to get questioned. And she like gave him a timeline, but she never said she was at Moe's. She said she went to like yoga and a healer, but not at Moe's. And I think he said he asked if she had gone to Moe's, and I think she said no. And he said after the search warrant had been carried out at their house that Armstrong got very paranoid. And so the next day, they didn't have their cell phones or anything. She was paranoid about there maybe being like microphones or like recording devices inside their house. So she would make them go outside to talk. And then eventually they ended up walking to a coffee shop. And on the way, she came up with the idea that they should go to Walmart to get new cell phones, I guess like burner phones. And so they do that. And then I think after that, Colin says he goes to Lockhart and that Armstrong was supposed to meet him there. But she never shows up. She was supposed to like take somebody's vehicle there, maybe his mom's vehicle or something like that. I don't know why she couldn't take hers. But anyway. So he's not staying at his house. And then he says when he returns back home after being gone, he comes home to a note from Kaitlin saying that she tried to make it, but that she got into the car and that it smelled like gas. And so she turned around. And so that ends up being, so before he left, that ended up being, I guess, the last time that he saw her until that day in court, I think is what he said, which is just crazy. Anyway, I think that's where we left off. So it's super late. I'm going to go ahead and end this. And I'm going to hope that like the lighting's better tomorrow, that my eye isn't hurting tomorrow, that I get some sleep, and that this will be way shorter because I'll only be doing one day, right? But I'm super excited to get to hear what Kaitlin has to say tomorrow. All right. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share, do all the things. Comment, please. Okay. Bye.